between 102.50 and 102, keeping stops in the 102.50 range. That would be my my best prediction for this one. But again, there's nothing stopping if the US dollar considerably weakens further, crude oil continues to move higher, there's nothing stopping US Canada from breaking through that 102 range. However, I feel that is very unlikely at this time. If we also look at this predicted RSI from Vantage Point, we're in heavily oversold territory here. Predicted MACD has room to extend. Predicted TSI bottoming out here, again suggesting that the US CAD is going to move higher. Now that's our first one here. Again, this week we're going to stick mostly with our major pairs. Euro Swiss franc, I'm going to touch on that for a moment here. We had a very good call from Vantage Point on this crossover that's taken place, running this long flat signal here for months on Euro Swiss franc. Euro Swiss franc is heavily influenced, or I should say US Swiss franc is heavily influenced by Euro Swiss franc. Now this pair here also has extended. What I've talked about, the further it moves away from the 18-day predicted moving average from Vantage Point, the more likely it is it's going to retrace to it. We've closed all the way down at 147.48. I believe that this pair is going to reverse and start moving higher very shortly, but it could extend lower towards the 145 first. But we'll be watching US Swiss franc and Euro US very closely to see how things play out over there. But for now, the 147 area will certainly provide some insight here. Now going into the US-Japanese pair, very good call from Vantage Point here. This buy signal continues to hold despite volatility. Our 18-day predicted moving average, which is our major level of support, sitting at 91.50, 92.34, 92.72 with a close of 92.72. So in short, we are long US Japan while above 91.50. Little bit more of a minor retracement as possible here. I suspect a good entry point here to begin the week will be between 92.34 and 91.50. Only a sustained break of 91.50 will take the pressure off the top side, and I see that unlikely at this point. Now again, the cross pairs at this point in time, I'm not going to spend much time with. Focusing on the majors, they're going to be our directional indicators, which will indirectly affect those crosses. Euro US, we've had this crossover that's taken place in the end of November, first part of December. Very good call on this sell signal that came in off the 140, just above the 149 area. We're now starting to bottom out in this this 142 area. Now, important to notice here that these candlesticks are continually trying to get above this 18-day predicted moving average. The 18-day predicted moving average from Vantage Point now comes in at 144.39. The market is extended up to 144.89 for a bleak second earlier this week. Not really point of interest to even mention that. 144.89 has no significance to us. However, 144.59, 144.39 does. So if we get a sustained break of 144, I'm going to say 144.59, then obviously we're going to be looking for long positions. However, again, we want to be careful of those long positions right now because the probability of a whipsaw lower is very high. So again, we've had a good 6-7 weeks now of selling on Euro US. It would certainly be possible that this thing is getting ready to correct higher, but I'm using that word correct higher because I don't think it will be the start of a new trend. I believe it will be a corrective move, and Euro US will likely start moving towards the I would think we should eventually break the 142 area and start moving towards the 140. But again, it's very difficult to look at long-term positions of 1, 2, 3 months down the road here, respecting until we see more jobs reports from the U.S., until we see a lot of economic data is going to come out this week that is directly going to affect the Euro-US pair along with the other US-based pairs. So at this point, I'm not even going to try and predict more than a couple of weeks out at a time. So for now, Euro-US, we're going to be watching the 144.50, 144.80, anywhere in that range. A sustained break of 144.59 in the short term will take the pressure off the downside, and we're likely going to start a retracement towards the 146.20 area. That's my outlook on the Euro-US. Spending a little more time, obviously, on these majors. New Zealand US has already broken higher, so we can see that Euro US is lagging behind some of the other US based commodity based currencies. New Zealand US 72.42, 72.93, 73.50. We've closed at 73.64. We've closed above the 3-day exponential moving average. The key areas to watch here, obviously, in my opinion, 72.93, between 72.93 and 72.42 are critical areas to watch to see if this area can hold. I believe they likely will in the near term. Only a sustained break of 72.42 will take the pressure off the top side on New Zealand US currently. Now, Australia US, very similar, almost identical pair actually, so it's going to be a very similar outlook. Here we're looking at 90.56, 91.07, 91.99 are 3 levels of support. Only a sustained break of 90.56 will take the pressure off the top side on this. Commodities likely to move higher, but again, even if the commodities move higher, that doesn't necessarily mean that the US dollar is going to move lower. So very important to keep that in mind when trading these commodity-based currencies, specifically the CAD, the Aussie dollar, and the Kiwi. Now, going into our next pair, we're looking at the US Swiss franc. We can see that we've got a crossover attempting to take place here. Euro Swiss franc heavily influencing this pair. 103.15, 103.19, 102.88. We've closed at 102.37. The first obstacle, obviously, 102.88. If this area holds, then US Swiss franc is likely to break 102 within the next 24 to 48 hours. However, if we can get above these 3 areas, specifically if we can get above the 103.15 and hold above 103.15, then we can see that Vantage Point is very reluctant here to put out a long-term sell signal on US Swiss franc. The 8-day and the 18-day are riding piggyback to each other. However, the angle of these candlesticks moving downward is certainly a concern for longs. So we need to take that into consideration. We're going to the main thing is to begin the week that we identify the critical levels and go from there. So again, there is a sell opportunity here in the 103.15, 103.19 area. However, if we get up into that area, the risk of a breakout long is still very, very strong. So we need to keep that into consideration. Right now, my position, I still have an upside bias on US Swiss franc. However, our signal right now is flat with a slight downside bias. Looking at our final pair here, our British pound US dollar, we can see that this signal is still running pretty clean. 160.101, 160.27, 160.04 are 3 areas of resistance. However, we've closed, we can see here at 160.25. We have